welcome to day 14 of the CRaFTi Advent series, another one with a voiceover today, as you can tell. Yeah, I'm not sure where the first bit of footage for this video went, or whether I even filmed it. I can't actually remember now. I thought I had filmed it, but anyway. So those backgrounds that I just showed you, it's a technique that I like to call squishing, and they're just like little pieces of about A7 card, and I just splodged on 3 different colours of the Izink 3D paste. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called, and there's a mixture of like flat colours and pearlescent colours as well, and all I did was splodge on a few different colours. I think in both cases I used 2 of the pearly ones and 1 of the flat colours, just sort of like kind of pea-sized blobs all over the card. And then I just took another piece of card the same size and squished it on top, pulled them apart, and you got that really cool background. And when you see it up close in the photos at the end, you'll see all this cool veining that kind of happened in the background too. It looks really lovely, and yeah, so that's how I created the background, and I'm using 1 of each of the colours as my actual background behind the aperture, and it doesn't matter that it's not big enough for that circle aperture that I was cutting just now, because I'm going to hide the rest with the flowers. And I'm also using the second piece, because obviously you get 2 because you're pulling them apart from each other. I'm using the second piece of each one to cut that happy die. That's actually a Heidi swap one. I don't think it's available anymore. But if I find it on Amazon, I'll link it. So you can see me just planning out there where the background's going to go in those apertures. And to create a little bit of interest on that backing piece, I'm taking a Heidi Swap stencil. Again, I'm not sure if they're available anymore. I got mine off Amazon ages ago, but if I can find it, I'll link it. And I'm just using a piece of cut and dry foam and the pearly one of those 3D texture paste from Izink or Izink, and I'm just using it like a flat medium and just dabbing it through the stencil. It gives a really subtle look because it's kind of off-white, that pearly, because obviously pearl's usually a bit more of a light creamy colour, so it's a little bit off-white, so you can see it in person, but it's quite difficult to show in the camera. But it just adds something to the background, makes it just not plain white. So I'm now going to stamp out all my floral images. This is the Wild Hibiscus stamp set from Altenew. I love this one. I made these cards probably a year ago now, and I treated myself to that as an early Christmas present last year, I think. I really love the design of those flowers. They're just so lovely. I really need to use it again. I've used it a few times, that stamp set, especially in some magazine commissions, but I do need to do some more cards with it, and an art journal page would be brilliant with that stamp set too. And I'm just using the stamping platform because it makes it so much easier, because you can just spin it around and stamp them again. And I'm using Nuvo Hybrid ink pad. I'm using the black shadow colour, and the hybrid ink pads are perfect for water-based colouring and alcohol-based colouring, so I'm going to use my Copics to colour them in this video, but you could use your Aquaflows, you could use sparkle pens, you could even water down those 3D texture pastes and use them to paint with as well, although because some of them are pearly and they're quite opaque, it might cover up some of the line art, so you might want to leave your stamps in your stamping platform so you could like re-stamp over them afterwards. To get the black back, or you could heat emboss over them to get the black back. But yeah, any medium you want to use to colour them in, you don't have to use alcohol pens like I was. I think this was when I'd only just got my Copics, so I was trying to use them a lot because I really wanted to practice with them and stuff. And in the close-up photos at the end, you can kind of see more of the flicking motion that I was trying to do with the pens. On the petals that haven't got as many line details, I was trying to flick with the different colours of like the blues and reds to sort of mimic that kind of liney style, and on the flowers as well. Because I'd used two different blues in the background for the blue one, I picked out a deeper blue set of 3 Copics and a lighter blue set of 3, and so I left some of the more liney petals on the flowers, and then I coloured them with the lighter blue version. So instead of having 1 light blue and 2 dark blue flowers, I thought I'd mix the colours into the flowers so they looked more like cohesive. You can see me doing the flicking motion on there now. And then I really like using non-traditional colours for the foliage on your flowers and stuff, and obviously I'd use yellow for the background of both of these, and the centre of the flower was yellow, so I thought yellow would be a great colour for the foliage. I just did a magazine commission actually, and I'd used pink and purple foliage, so it's really interesting if you limit yourself to a colour palette and then try and make all of the elements on your card stick to that kind of colour palette too. It's a really interesting way of making a card, especially when you're using floral images and you haven't got a green in your colour palette, trying to think outside the box. Like grey also looks really nice for the foliage too. So here's me colouring in all of the red versions as well, and for the red I think, yeah, I used red, yellow and white texture paste in the background, or the pearly one. So on the flowers I did the same kind of thing as I was doing for the blue flowers, but for the petals I left out I then used some orangey colours to go along with it, because, you know, red and yellow make orange, so there was kind of orange hints where the two texture pastes had mixed in the background for that squish as well. The great thing about those squishes for the backgrounds is you can do them on whatever size piece of card you want. Like, you can just use up your scraps and do that, and then leave them to dry, and then cut out flowers or little heart embellishments, or like I did for these ones I even cut out scripty words. I mean, say you've been using your texture paste through stencils and stuff, and you'd taken some out of the pot and you'd mixed your own colour and you've got some left. You know, take that, mix it in with some of the pure colours that you'd been using as well, and just create some backgrounds, leave them to dry, and then you've got some instant pieces to use and spark off more ideas for the next time you're crafting. You can actually see in that one at the top of the screen, you can see that cool veining texture. That's where you've had more of the texture paste, and when you've pulled the two pieces of card apart, you know, it's kind of been thick and gloopy, so it's given you that cool, I keep saying cool, it's given you that kind of veiny texture. It looks kind of like leaves. And you don't actually lose that when you die cut it. I've got one of the cards in front of me now, because obviously all of these videos in CRaFTi Advent are ones that are still sitting on my shelf. But anyway, I've got one in front of me, the blue one, and you can actually still feel that texture on the happy die cut. So even die cutting it doesn't squash that texture down. At this point, I decided I needed some more foliage, because one leaf wasn't going to balance the design enough. I usually like to do sort of 3 flowers and 5 leaves, or 3 flowers and 3 leaves, or 3 leaves and 1 flower. And so for these cards I went for 3 leaves and 3 flowers, just because I didn't want it to make it too busy, and I didn't really want any leaves coming behind the happy sentiment, because they'd sort of interfere with you being able to read that. I mean, I think it is maybe a little bit hard to read, but I like that. It kind of draws you into the card and makes you look harder to see it. So for the birthday part of the sentiment, because I used the happy die cut, the birthday is from the Happy 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 stamp set from Fawn, one of my favourite stamp sets. And then I'm just drawing a border around the edge, and then to tie some of the colour into this, I decided just to add a little rectangle with some diagonal lines onto the side of it. And then I'm just going to use the same colours of Copics as I used to colour the flowers in, just to add a little bit of colour to that section. I love little details like that, and at the moment I seem to keep forgetting to do those kind of things, or they just don't register with me as much and I just don't realise that I've actually done them. But it's just a cool little way of adding a little hand-drawn element to your card, but you're kind of mimicking something that's already on the card, if that makes any sense. Because you see from the leaves there, they're sort of kind of diagonal lines on one side of, well, both sides of them, but you know what I mean. So it's kind of emulating that look and bringing it into the rest of the card. And also adding that black outline around the sentiment too, it kind of brings in the black outline of the stamps as well, so it just sort of balances the card nicely too. So here I'm just laying out all the different elements, deciding on the placement, and then I decided I really liked the way I'd placed those blue ones, so I orientated the red flowers exactly the same way. And you could do this with any shaped aperture you want as well. You know, an oval aperture would look really nice, a square one as well, even a heart if you're doing, you know, more of like a love themed card, or, you know, for someone who's a close friend or whatever. So I'm just adding 3D foam behind this panel so that when you add the background on, there's a little bit of depth between the background and the main panel, making sure that I leave that open gap towards the bottom where the flowers are going to be. So it's going to cover up that gap. Then I'm just going to fold and cut down my card blanks. The stitched rectangle I'm using is 4 by 5¼ inches, which is my favourite size. So I just cut down my card blanks to a teeny bit bigger than that. And I just cut down A6 card blanks because the width is perfect, and then the length you just need to cut off like 1 centimetre, and it fits perfectly this rectangle. Then I'm just going to add on all of the flowers and leaves, and if you're not very good at remembering the placement that you had, or you're worried you're going to get distracted and go off and do something else and forget, you could take a photo of how you've laid out all of your elements first, and then get it back up on your phone before sticking everything down properly, and then you've got something to refer back to in case you get distracted and come back and you're like, oh no, I was halfway through placing them and I've forgotten. I do that too, so just adding the happy, and then I'm going to stick the birthday over the top, and then I'm just going to do exactly the same for the red version as well. Oh, and I keep getting questions about how do you make sure you don't get muddy colours. With these, they're probably not going to make mud that much, because they're more of like a solid product rather than a really watery product that's going to run into each other. But if you Google a picture of a colour wheel, and then when you're picking your colours, try to pick 3 colours that are next to each other on the colour wheel, so like red, orange, yellow, or blue, green, yellow, or blue, purple, red, those kind of colours. Basically you're picking 2 primary colours, and then you're going to use the secondary colour that it makes when you mix those 2. I just find that's the easiest way of making sure you're not going to get any muddy colours. And if you do decide to like span across half the colour wheel, just make sure you try and keep them in the order of the colour wheel. So you're not going to start mixing orange and green together. You're going to have orange to yellow to green. So you're going to get that nice variation of the colours. Kind of like if you think of the rainbow as well, really. All the colours of the rainbow would blend nicely together. But if you started mixing green and red together, you're going to start getting brown colours. But if you just keep to colours that are next to each other, I think, are they called analogous colours when they're next to each other on the colour wheel? I think they are. Yeah, just keep to them. Then you shouldn't get too much mud. Oh, and then, so for the rest of the card, I went off on a bit of a tangent then. Anyway, the rest of the card, I'm just putting some rainbow gems in the centres of the flowers. I'm using yellow ones in the centres, either using, actually I used 3 different sizes for each of the centres, so just a cluster of 3 yellow gems, and then I'm using blue and red for the respective cards. And I'm still selling some of these rainbow gems on eBay, so I will put the link to them below if you're interested. I think it really finishes off the card, adding the little gems. They just make it look so lovely. Or you could add sequins as well. or Nuvo drops too, whichever kind of mood you're in really. I just thought the gems worked nicely with this because they're sort of reflecting lots of different colours that are in the card. And then just putting the red ones on this one, and they're like 3 different sizes, so I like to scatter, and I like to scatter an odd number as well, so I've scattered 7 of the blue or the red on these 2 cards, and I've used a mixture of sizes as well. I never put 2 of the same size next to each other unless I only have 2 sizes, but I just find that gives a nice balance to the card. So that's all finished now. I really love how these cards came out, and I really must do some more again. They're just so happy and cheerful. I think I just sold the red one at my last craft fair, so I definitely need to make some more because the only one's now sitting on my shelf. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Today was number 14, so check back tomorrow for number 15. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!